we don't actually take enough time to understand our customer because we
Hmm.
think of them as a customer. We think of them outside of ourselves, which they are, but we forget they're just a human being.
Yeah.
And so, on a very human to human level, what value are we creating in their life that we're proud of, that we feel is unique?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Kristen Constable, and welcome to the Soulful CEO Path, where wisdom blends with strategy and success is measured in alignment and impact. And this podcast is all about guiding soul centered bosses like you through the integration of soul and strategy in business. And each episode, we explore the journey of creating a deeply fulfilling business that honors your values, nurtures your spirit, and serves the world. And okay, so today is an extra special episode, not only because the guest that we have on is an absolute expert when it comes to bridging the worlds of brand marketing and sales, but he is also my better half. And I just want to give you a little bit behind the scenes of our relationship because before I started living with Ryan, I thought that I was a morning person. Like I would wake up, I would have my most productive hours in the morning. But as soon as I started living with Ryan, I realized that actually I was not a morning person because this guy wakes up at like 5, 6 a.m. in the morning and he'll like poke me and be like, "Are you up? Are you up?" Because his brain turns on so quickly and he has all these ideas. And so, how that actually really positively impacts me is very often we will be up while it's still dark, drinking our coffees, having these really cool conversations around brand marketing and sales. And I get to benefit from them by just being in these conversations. So today I wanted to bring Ryan onto the show to give you guys a little bit of an insight into the kinds of conversations that we have. And hopefully you'll be able to take something away from today that helps you like it has helped me. So, Ryan, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be really fun and a different way to have these conversations that we usually have, anyways.
Yeah, no, it should be good. I'm happy that you told everyone that we're lovers, so that's half the battle of today's conversation. So
Yeah. Well, okay. So that's where I actually want to start is I'm going to start with a kind of a personal share around one of the things that we've actually gotten into multiple arguments about and why you refer to me as a problem client now.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And
yes.
so the topic is this topic that you've chatted with me about or tried to support me with, we could say. And the question you often ask is, what makes your brand or what you do uniquely valuable? And to be honest, it's been a confronting question for me to be able to sit in and answer because on a like feeling based level, I'm like, well, I know what it is. And like, I'm a special butterfly, like snowflake and like whatever, all those things. But then to actually articulate that and put that into something meaningful that other people can see, experience, and understand, that's a lot harder. So I wanted to kind of like start there with you around this conversation around like what makes brands uniquely valuable and why that's so important, and get you to give us some of your insight in that on that topic.
Well, I'm happy that you recognize yourself as a problem client. So that's a good thing. I
I'll
think.
admit it. I'll admit it.
Well, I think the answer your question. The reason why it's so challenging is because it's a very, like you said, confronting question. When someone is asking, like, "What are you good at? Why should people care?" That can be a hard question to answer because that brings up a lot of, especially for those that are a solopreneur or running their own shtick. It brings up like that's a poking of the bear kind of question, but it's definitely needed in one being able to understand and articulate what makes them unique amongst the many that do what they do. And so I
Mhm.
think the thing a lot forget about is 99% of what people do, other people do in a literal sense.
Yeah.
So what that means is how do we separate ourselves amongst all of those? We've got to figure out what makes us not only valuable, but uniquely valuable. And so when you ask that question around how does that work in terms of brand? I think there's two things there to kind of unpack. There's first the understanding of what I refer to as more strategy, which is rooting and figuring out what makes one uniquely valuable, and then how to take that from a conceptual lens and articulate it through a brand lens, which we all know that's what people do. They don't buy products and service, they buy brands. So yeah, in terms of how you want to unpack it, why don't you ask me a question? And I'm better that way on
Yeah.
the Q&A than a keynote
Totally.
speaker.
Yeah. Well, I think when we see examples of really powerful brands, they tend to be these bigger brands and maybe like product-based brands too. So, things like a Nike, for example, or I was just thinking about because we've had this conversation around that water company called Liquid Death before and how they've been able to do such an amazing thing, really take water and make it really cool and build this brand around it. And so there's these examples that as a service-based business owner we might look at and be like, well, they can do that because they are a product-based brand or something like that. But when you're a service-based brand, and one of the conversations we often have is, how do you make these like boring businesses interesting? So I've kind of brought two things together there. But as a service-based brand and a business that might not do these like interesting things that like a Red Bull or Nike could do, how do we look at our brands and make them uniquely interesting?
Well, I think off the top there, I mean, I think every business can be interesting if we are creative enough to find it. So I think there's a reframe there, even in the language. Is like, well, we're not X, so how do we be this? It's like relevant to what you do. You need to believe that what you offer is of value and interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people that have a challenge with that. So if that's already, I don't know, and how do I show up? How do I play? There's work there to be done, but you've got to think and feel and believe that what you offer is of value. And if we believe it's of value, then it can become interesting. And so,
Mm,
in terms of that, I think, you know, what I do a lot of work is trying to understand what it is that one does that creates value in another human being's life. And you can call that a client or a customer or a consumer relative to the industry you're in, product or service. But how well or how clear are you to yourself on how you positively affect and create change within the hearts and minds of your customer?
mm-hmm.
And stopping right then and there and taking pen to paper, having a conversation and saying, like, what do we do that's special? What do we do that, like, moves us emotionally? What do we do that when we hear these stories from our customer or our client, when they share back to us, it makes our heart pitter patter? Where do we really create big radical change in their lives? And
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what those things are, I think, sometimes we don't actually take enough time to understand our customer, because we
Mm-hmm.
think of them as a customer. We think of them outside of ourselves, which they are, but we forget they're just a human being.
Yeah.
And so, on a very human to human level, what value are we creating in their life that we're proud of, that we feel is unique?
Yeah.
And that's
Okay. So
where, yeah,
Well, I was just
there
going
you
to
go.
say that's, I think, the interesting part here, because often what I find a lot of my clients do, and I've definitely fallen in this trap and still do to time at times, is we sell the thing. So it's like, say, as a coach or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, I do a 6-month coaching program, and it's this many, and I'm a business coach, and it's this many sessions, and these are the outcomes that we
Sure.
get. But we had a really interesting conversation around this the other day around like service-based businesses, not necessarily coaching, but we have lots of conversations. But let's just use the example of refrigeration and
Yeah.
how, say, a refrigeration company can sell refrigeration, but that becomes like a commodity business then where everyone's selling the same thing. So in that space, how can a business differentiate themselves? Well, they can differentiate themselves on something like service, as an example, because to their ideal client, that means everything. And we just had a power outage here multiple days like ago that was 7 hours long. And I was thinking about this because I was like, this is bad for us, but like imagine restaurants that are like 7 hours, they've got like thousands of dollars worth of food in their thing, and
Yeah.
it's a big deal. So if you can actually find that piece around what do they actually care about? Is it the refrigeration? Maybe, but it's more than that. So maybe I'll get you to jump off from that point to see if there's anything you can add in around how you think about that unique differentiator.
Well, I think that the challenge that a lot of going back to, again, 99% of the things that are done on a very literal sense, um, there's nothing unique about the literal thing. Like technology,
Mm-hmm.
like a Tesla, something that an Elon Musk could create is like fucking crazy, and it just speaks for itself, and it is what it is. But when we're thinking about these service based, you know, businesses, um, we have to realize or take the time to realize that the product or the service is just it's the mere delivery system of the value. So
Mm-hmm.
when we bring that back to these bigger brands that spend so much time on cultivating something that is so unique and special, that at the core of every product or service that they deliver is it's like it's the heart, it's the DNA, it's the through line. You would never see a big brand like Tiffany or something all of a sudden just go, well, yeah, we're going to do a $29 bracelet. And I would just
Mm-hmm.
think people that, can't afford it would want that. No, they understand the value that they create in the lives and the head and the heart of their customers. That doesn't even make sense. It's almost contradictory to everything that they do. So when it comes to these businesses that are quote unquote boring or not interesting, like sexy, I always call it, is we've got to figure out what is it that there's a million people that could sell refrigeration. We've got to narrow down on the ideal customer that we want to do business with, and how that makes business sense, meaning like they have to have a willingness to spend to the level at which we're looking to ideally price or serve to. And that's a big thing, is that we can't, you've got to understand who has, where's the money, find the money. Money's important. And so when understanding it and going like, okay, if it's boutique hotels or restaurants or condos or whatever, why is what we do important? Like, why
Mm-hmm.
is what we do actually important? If people don't have it, what happens? If they don't
Right.
have this, what happens? And understanding that um is super super critical. Like if they can't function, if they can't live, if they can't work, if they can't eat, if they can't sleep, if there's then to me, and I'm not very smart, as you know, that starts to become it's pretty important what we do. That already starts to take on more meaning. So now, how do we provide products or services that would ensure that people could eat and sleep and work to the best of their efficiency and their ability? What would that mean? Would that mean we would do 24/7 service instead of, I don't know, 48-hour service?
Mm-hmm.
Would we have people working on our call lines 24/7? Because if it goes out at 3 in the morning and people need to work at 6 a.m., it needs to be, you start to get into this idea of creativity and start to
Mm-hmm.
imagine these things where it's less about the guy on the road that comes to the place and fixes the thing. That again is just a vehicle, or a medium to express it. We need to figure out why is that important. And I
Yeah.
think if we can spend more time understanding why that's important to them, the customer, not us, we start to figure out the products and services
Yeah.
that would be able to facilitate that. And we start to understand how valuable that is in terms of how we position that, communicate that, price that, etc.
Yeah. So you just sparked something that you've said before that I love as an exercise. I'm going to share it with everybody because I think it's super helpful. When you get what we're talking about right now and you spend the time to like really understand what makes you uniquely your business, your brand uniquely valuable, it then becomes this decision making filter that you can put everything through. So this really simple filter that Ryan shared with me before is this: if this, then that. So if we were this, then we would do that. And I think that that's like really, and you kind of touched on it with the Tiffany example of like, if we're this premium luxury brand, like, would we sell a $29 bracelet? No, right? And so it helps focus
Hmm.
all of the things we could be doing.
Hmm.
And I'm just thinking about the coaching space is like, there's like low ticket offers, high ticket offers, retreats. There's like,
Yeah.
this like huge thing that, and everyone's saying that their way is the best way and you should be doing low ticket, you should be doing high ticket. But if you get this part, then you can kind of cut out the noise and be like, hey, if I'm this, would I do that? If I'm this, would I do that? And it's super helpful, I think, as a decision making filter.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things there to it is when you say if we were that, we'd have to do this. That's
Mm-hmm.
where we really get into this world of creativity and what comes up with a lot of clients that we work with that are they're running the shizo themselves. It's them, themselves, me, myself,
You're
and I.
allowed to
That's
swear on here, just so you know. You
okay,
don't have
great.
to say weird words like
Wow.
shizo.
I try so I try not to cuss so much. No. But again, if it's me, myself, and I, who's HR? Me. Who's marketing? Me. Who
Yeah.
yeah, it's all me. The challenge that happens is that um we don't take the time to just slow down
Mm-hmm.
and go, if we were, let's use the example of the refrigeration company, if we wanted to be the Grey Goose, the Mercedes, the Ritz, the whatever refrigeration, let's just play with that for a second. What would that mean? Well, it would mean X, it would mean Y, it would mean Z. That's like the that and this kind of idea, or
Yeah.
using the what and how. And one of the things that a lot of solopreneurs forget is they get stuck in the land of how,
Mm-hmm.
not in the world of what.
Right.
The world of what is the value creation. The how is the product or service to deliver said value. And so that when people ask you a question, like, I'm thinking we could be this, and they go, well, how? Especially on the client side, I'm kind of like, slow the fuck down. I don't know. I'm just saying, what if we were to do this? Well, maybe we'd have to do that. And what if we were to do that? Well, then we'd probably have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is we get so stuck in our ways because we're such literal thinkers. And a lot of the time we're spending a lot of time with ourselves, almost too much time, that we get stuck in this how. This guy's thing, 17.99, I gotta be 16.99. It just and they're not looking at it from the lens of who are the people that I want to serve? Who's the customer?
Mm-hmm.
What do they give a shit about? Just because someone else is doing it or a bunch of people are doing it at $20 per unit, does that mean that there's no other way to provide an alternative to that? Could we? What if we did more than they did? What if we
Yeah.
offered 3 times the value? Would we still charge the same? So for me, because I'm not the brightest, I use I use that common sense terminology, but that's where a lot of that creativity kind of comes into is I
Yeah.
is trying to just slow down. And before we start, you know, getting so literal, let's take the time to think about the people we're here to serve, the value that we could create. And so that's how these like this and that exercises are they're not lingo, Mark. It's not too, it just,
Yeah.
if I was to wear this, would I wear those earrings? If I was to wear those earrings, would I wear that jacket? Like you start to just to play like that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's now talk about this. Like, I want to transition a little bit because you're kind of going there is this idea of brand and this unique, what makes you uniquely valuable, being in service to a bigger strategic conversation that bridges the worlds of brand, marketing, and sales. And that's, I think, what you do really well is that and this is comes from your background, like, so a lot of people don't know who you are, but you have a background in sales. That's kind of where you started. Then you went into agency world and did a lot of work around brand and marketing, and then saw that there's this huge gap in between those worlds to drive sales. So that's kind of what you really do well now, I would say, and what your unique value is in offering to the world is that you take the world of brand and marketing and think about how does it drive sales and increase profit. So I want to kind of like go there a little bit because I think that this is a really important conversation, especially for solopreneurs, people who are maybe newer to business. I know I have wasted so much money on things that have created zero ROI, like
Yes.
zero.
Yes.
And it's so frustrating when you're a small business owner and like it means a lot. Like to spend
Yeah.
$10,000 on something
Sure.
means a lot and it doesn't get you the results that you want. And so, what do you see people, where do you see small business owners, maybe like me, going wrong when it comes to investing in brand and marketing? And what advice would you give them to do instead?
That's a good question. Um, I think that at the core of it all, I mean, the only reason that you are, call it purpose driven or call it founder led or whatever you want, people that are running successful businesses need to sell things and make money. There's just like no, like you can't create impact if you don't sell things and make money. You have no money, you can't build a bit. Like it's just so. I think one of the challenges that happens with a lot of this and bringing it back to sales and really bringing it back to like how do you sell more and how do you keep more, drive revenue and maximize profit is when it comes to the worlds of brand marketing and sales, a lot of folk are that are especially in, the solopreneur land, they haven't been exposed to good or bad until they go through the situations that you went through where they spend money on something that doesn't work. And I mean, that's kind of par for the course for a lot when you're building, but a lot of them just aren't even sure in the role that each play.
Hmm.
So if we can break that down first, it may give some better understanding.
Sure. Why don't you dive into that?
So brand is an intangible, beautiful, magical thing. And it's very, very, very hard to quantify. The same way that there's things that people that are listening to this do very well that are just uniquely them and special, but you can't really quantify it. It's like it's just part of who they are and what they do. Um, and it makes them them. But the role of a brand at the core of it all is to create meaningful difference among all of the other products and services or companies that are selling products or services in the market. So,
Hmm.
one thing I look at a lot is reframing language and reframing things. If we took brand off the table and I replaced it with the word reputation, would it matter to you?
I mean, it definitely has a different connotation.
In what
There's some
sense?
brand to me, when I think about that, feels external. Reputation feels internal.
Got it. So, when it comes to that though, when you look at the biggest brands in the world, they live it, right? Like the attention to detail, it's not something outside of themselves, it's their reputation.
Hmm.
They're known for it and they live by it and they adhere to that and they deliver on that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so really what brand is in a lot of ways is this intangible, powerful tool that allows us to communicate what makes us meaningfully different.
Hmm. Which is so good because as we're talking about this, I think I made this mistake, and I think people do, is they think about brand as their logo, their color palette, their
Colors. Yeah.
photos, their all
Yeah.
that, right? And without knowing this piece, like it's flat. There is nothing to it. It's like, okay, well, it's just something that you like versus it being rooted in what we've been talking about, that unique value up to this point, and then being able to operationalize that.
Very much so. And that starts from first understanding at the top of the conversation what makes us uniquely valuable.
Hmm.
Because they're just brands, colors, and words. I mean, they're just colors, word. Like it's just ingredients in a kitchen.
Hmm.
How you put that together and how you communicate that and what that all has to stem from something very real, which is what we spoke on and figure out what makes you uniquely valuable, having that conviction, understanding that.
Yeah.
Brand is simply just taking that, which is very kind of conceptual, and communicating it to something that's tangible. People can
Yeah.
see it, feel it, and that's where branding comes into play. But that's the challenge of a lot of people that are listening to this is they're not even sure on the unique value they offer to the world. So trying to package it, position it, present it to the world with colors and you don't know who you are, it's hard to dress, and then you wonder
Yeah.
why people don't think you're attractive. It's like, well, you don't know who you are yet, so it doesn't. Going shopping is going to be a hell of a time. So, I think there's that side.
So that's the brand side.
That's
So
the
let's
brand
talk
side
about
of it.
marketing then.
So the marketing then is that that's the thing is that you don't market products and services, you market brands.
Hmm.
So if you don't have a brand, what are you marketing?
Right. And so that's a big distinction to take away is that I think a lot of people, and I would say if I were to even think about that right now, I probably am more in the camp of marketing products and services versus a brand. And so what you're saying, because just to tie it back to that original question I asked you around like, what advice do you have for people? It would be what I'm hearing is like, start with the brand, figure out who you are and what you uniquely offer, and then market that versus your products and your offerings. Are we
Yeah,
tracking?
well, exactly. I think at the core, if we even back it up further, is we figure out what we offer in terms of value, what makes us uniquely valuable, and that goes into the proposition. You've heard obviously the value proposition. What is that proposition? How do we position that? What's the personality of that? Then
Mm-hmm.
we need to brand it. Now, when you brand it, that's where these offers start to really come into play. The same way we spoke on Tiffany, one of their offerings is, if they're a premium, if they're positioned as a premium brand, then the offerings follow suit. You can't be a premium brand and offer discount products. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work like that. You can't. So these little things, the reason why I explain it the way I do and I laugh and I'm playful with it is because it can be confusing and people don't understand it. But if we slow it down and go, well, first we need to figure out the value, then we need to brand it. Okay, great. Now we got our offers. Okay, now we're cooking. Now we need to market it. Really, what marketing is, I break it down. It's like it's selling at scale. You've got online channels and you've got offline channels. And so you've got to figure out who's your customer, what value do you create in their lives, how do you brand that, then where do you market it? Where are they spending time? How do you make yourself super findable?
Yeah.
And once we go through the marketing side, that's when we get into um, the sales, which kind of takes on
Yeah.
its own life.
And just so we make sure that we close the loop on everything. Would you consider advertising under kind of that marketing umbrella? So you're basically just turning up the volume on the marketing, or where does that fit in?
Yeah. So if we look at it from that lens, is advertising is essentially, and the focus of advertising is usually and always has been campaign driven. There's a centralized idea. So Nike will come out with a new shoe. The refrigeration company we spoke on will come up with a new offer.
Or let's say like Black Friday sales for people who
Yes.
are in the service based business that you might be thinking about right now.
So when we think about, okay, now that we understand the value we create, now that we have our brand, and advertising is a chapter within almost like your story, that you come up with something interesting and meaningful.
Hmm.
How do we come up with a centralized idea that gets people to emotionally connect, to want to buy a product or service in a specific time period? So that much fits into marketing. But again, to what we talk, it's very hard to do advertising when you haven't done those things because you'll run ads, but they don't convert because people don't have an emotional connection to the brand. More so, you may be advertising or running your advertising and marketing it through the wrong channels. So, um, yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot there, but in trying to be of as much value to those that are listening to this as possible is especially if you're a small business, one thing to think about is we don't need to think like a Nike and we don't need to think like a Red Bull. We don't need to think like we need to think about like, let's look at our total addressable market. A lot of times what we forget is we forget that like if we just looked in our own town, city, province, country, like there's a lot of people that you could help serve that you don't need to be running ads to some guy or girl in Indiana to buy your thing. What if you lived in Vancouver, you went and you picked out a couple different markets that you thought you could create a lot of value for people, and then how would you attract them and how would you market towards those people? So trying to, as big as we want to think creatively to get people to emotionally connect and understand, we also want to think very like simple.
Yeah,
and localized in that. And that's definitely the balance for um, trying to be effective with all this stuff.
for sure. And maybe that would segue well into the last conversation that we'll have is around sales, which is can be more of that. Well, I don't know. I guess I'll let you describe how you see sales fitting into all of this.
Well, I think if you ask out of 10 people, what's the role of sales? You get 9.5 people that would give you the right answer.
Okay, explain more.
Okay. So it's somewhat very transactional. People have things, you have money, people have
Hmm.
needs, you have offers. They give you money, you get things, everyone's happy, go lucky. It's versus if you ask people, 10 people, what's the role of marketing, you're going to get maybe 4 answers. And then you ask people brand, there you go. So again, I try to bring, you ask people, what's the role of a brand at 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers. That's why it's so confusing.
Yeah, so sales is exchanging value essentially.
Essentially, at the end of the day, sales is really the humanized, that's where a buyer and a seller come together to exchange value.
Hmm.
One has a product or service and offer a value. One has a problem or a desire, a need. They
Hmm.
come together, they do some sort of exchange.
Okay, so if it's so basic though, then why do so many people have a challenge with sales? And how does what we've been talking about up to this point
Yeah.
facilitate selling being easier?
Well, a couple things. One, I think sales is very much the purest form of human to human, hu- humans working with humans to have conversations about things that are important, which is not easy. We're together. You can attest to that. So there's always going to why is it? Because it's really just it's alive. It's two people that are actually in the ring trying to figure it out. The reason why I think a lot of people, especially in the solopreneur side, can struggle with it is they don't have a brand or their marketing doing the work for them.
Mm,
It's a lot easier to sell uh, a Harley Davidson bike than it is like Pete's crazy uncle who made a little dirt bike in his backyard.
right.
They're not even comparable. So you've got to have some of that stuff working for you. Otherwise, you're really just trying to sell with nothing working for you. But I think at the core of it all, one of the hard things about selling is there's so many different misconceptions on the role of sales. Some people have a really hard relationship with sales. They've
Hmm.
been misguided or mistreated. They've been ripped off. They had a mom or a dad or an uncle or an old boss that was against it. They had people like there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
But I think that we have to get out of the roles of vendor or seller and buyer. And we need to look at it as a peer to peer relationship. And we need to be able to have conversations instead of trying to pitch people. We need
Yeah.
to believe in what we do is of as much value as the need or the problem that the client or the customer is coming to you with. There's a lot of self worth that shows up in how one sells.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think just to kind of tie it back is that yes, if you have the brand and the marketing working for you, it's different if people can kind of look at that and be like, okay, there's already some credibility and some alignment in terms of, like if you're not aligned with, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, you're not going to want walk into a Tiffany store because you can just tell from the outside it's going to be expensive. So it kind of is the same thing with marketing and brand with for everyone's business is it allows people to um, opt in or out, pre qualify or not. But I think the important underlying thing of what you're also saying is that when you understand what makes you uniquely valuable and you can communicate that, it becomes a lot easier to sell because you're
Yes.
not selling what everyone else is selling. You're able to actually just be like, this is what I've got. And this is what I think I hear you saying that you need. And this sounds like a perfect fit to me. So it kind of allows you to have more confidence in that conversation versus like it needing to be this script or this, pitch, as you were saying.
Yeah, very much so. Also, the role of marketing is to get, you hear the word funnel and funnel. Everyone's got a funnel. Where's your funnel? Have a funnel. Is y- y- People first have to be aware of who you are and what you do.
Hmm.
So if you right now I'm in a coffee shop. So if I just walked up and started to tell people like, "Hey, this is what I want," and you're gonna buy this thing, they go, "Who are you, you psychopath? Why are you talking to me?" They're not
Yeah.
aware of who you are and what you do. The second thing is that you've got to get people interested then. They've got to be aware. And in today's landscape, this is the thing is that you're competing for attention. Majority of people are going to figure out, find out about you through their mobile phone, aka the internet and social media. So they've got to become aware and you're competing with everyone for attention. And that is a tough game, but that is the reality of where we're at in terms of commerce and how people buy and sell today. Second thing is they have to become interested. Now that you have their attention, how do you get them interested? Then from there, how do we build desire? How do we get them to really start to emotionally connect with the propositions that we're making or the things that we're claiming and how we can be of service and help? When you have someone who's coming to you who's interested and is coming at it from being in the stage of desire to the psycho in the coffee shop just asking for the sale, it's a completely different game. And which one do you think is going to be easier to, um, what's going to be a much more enjoyable sales or selling process, exchange for both. So I think, yeah, there's just sales. And the other thing too is like, in being honest, as you know of me, some people are just not good. Like I'm not a good dancer. I'm more than happy to have you dance with someone great. I'm the shits. I'm okay with that. I know I'm not a good dancer. So I don't go out there and I try to offer that to the marketplace. There's no value. So you have to also be realistic with what you bring to the table. Some people that are a solopreneur really they have a hard time selling because that's not who they are. Maybe they're much better at the work and being it from a coaching example. They love it. They thrive on that. They're fantastic. And that's where their heart pitter patters and they come to life. But you got to get them there. You
Yeah.
can't, you got, there's, it's hard to be a good coach when there's no one to coach. So sometimes being honest and taking inventory through these worlds of brand, marketing, and sales, you know, um, it can be sometimes I don't want to say confusing, but we've got to take inventory of where we really show up. Maybe we're not as good as this, so we need help with that. Maybe we're not
Mm.
as good as that, so we need help with this.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot to it, and I think for the people that are listening to the work that you do and what you do is like you're gonna figure out and find out pretty quickly what you're good at and what you're not good at. And sometimes some of the best advice is just realizing you may not be that good at this. Yes, maybe you can up your game, but what if you can help and what if you can work with people that can help you with that? I think that's of great benefit.
Yeah, totally. And I think that depends on, the level where you're at, and outsourcing things that you aren't good at or that you don't enjoy is so smart, and it takes resources. So at a certain point, at certain points in people's business, they have to do it all. Unless you have, investment or something like that you can put in. So what I will say is that from my own experience is all of these things are learnable. You may not be the best at selling, but I can share from my own experience. I had no idea how to really sell, even into like the first 3-4 years of my business, because most of my business was referral based. And then when I went online, I had all these cold leads that I had to sell to. I'm like, I need to figure this out. And I worked with people that I they're great at that, at selling, and I got to learn a skill set that didn't have before, and now I'm super comfortable in that. So I just want to say that, because I think it's important not to be like, well, if you're not good at it, you're kind of screwed. It's like, that's not the case. And yes, of course, at a certain level, hire out, but as you're growing, there's so many resources out there for you to learn from and to up your game. And the more you know about all of these things, the better set up you're going to be able to hire out for them. Like, if you don't know anything about ads, hiring out and getting an ads person to work for you is going to be hard. So it's like knowing what you're even asking for, getting to that certain level of expertise and understanding, then you can hire out with so much more ease.
Yeah, I think asking, I just on that asking, I mean, all the two is like, it's not good or bad to say. And that's how I work with our clients is like, I think it, all joking aside, admitting where you're not strong is a strength.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to ask people for that help is a strength. But don't fool yourself if you're not good at things because you need to ask for that help and you need to find people that work with you. I'm not saying outsource it all the time, but I think that if you're in the same position you've been in a year's time, there's something that needs to be upped in your game. And we need to be honest with ourselves that, like, I need help here. But again, to your point, it's all learnable. It just takes that time to be honest on those things. And when we're honest
Yeah.
with ourselves, those things, yeah, we're able to, again, just see how we can communicate what we do much more in a simple way to help those that we want to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, that's a good place to wrap this up. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at how this episode performs. And if it does well and people like it, we might come back for another episode that we can go a little bit deeper on some of these topics because I know you've got lots to share. And if it doesn't do well, you're not coming back. That's the way it is.
Yeah, no,
But thank you for everything you had to share today. One of the questions that I always ask guests at the end is what does being a soulful CEO mean to you? Now, I don't think you would identify, this is just me, as a soulful CEO.
no, I don't
But
have
what
that
I wanted,
tattoo yet.
yeah, but what
No.
I want to test you on, because I've talked about this a lot with you and I've enrolled you into this vision and idea. What do you think being a soulful CEO means?
Look, I think at the end of the day, like, my makeup is interesting. I'm, full of piss and vinegar, but I have a big heart. I can be assertive, but I also love to, like, take care. I think being a soulful CEO or just listening to your soul, your spirit, there's so much more in here that we need to share with the world, but we get really weird around other people and we act weird when we stop listening to this. And I think that,
He's pointing to his heart just for because most of you are going to be
yeah,
listening
yeah.
to this.
So
Yeah.
is there's so much more in there that the world needs to see and hear. And it's scary, but the more that you lean into what makes you good, bad, and ugly, for some reason, the more it sticks and the more that it connects with people, the more that it lands because you're being the purest version of yourself. And I think you're allowing your spirit, or as you refer to your soul, into the world. And so the more that we listen and the more risks that we take with self, spirit, soul, call it what you will, the more that it somehow pans out and makes what we do much more attractive to those that we want to serve.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing. I love how you share stuff because often, you and I have very different approaches to life, to how we speak, all of that. But ultimately, often it comes down to we have the same ideas around stuff. They're just expressed very differently.
Yes.
So it's cool to hear you say that and talk about that, like authenticity, alignment, all of the things that, I would really define being a soulful CEO around. You just say it a little different.
Very much.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you to everyone who shared in listening into this episode with us. I hope you really enjoyed it. And I hope you got to take away from this conversation something that can really support you in bringing more of you and your soul into this world and into your work. And if you found this show helpful, please remember to hit that follow or subscribe button. It really does do wonders for the show so more people can benefit from conversations like these. And if you have any questions about what we just talked about, I'm going to link Ryan's information in the show notes, and you can always DM me at Kristen Constable as well. So thanks for joining, and until next time, we'll see you on the Soulful CEO path.